full session today. We'll just kind of go over the budget.
All right, it's in two parts. First is the review of the data booklet that you all received. And the data booklet is based on the questions raised at the January work session. Aiden Dunleavy has done a wonderful job of compiling the data. And since he is the data guru, he is the one who's going to present the data. And once you have the data, then we'll move into the Kent Williams presentation on a budget update. So if it's all right with the board, I'll turn it over to Abe.
Okay, let me just share this. Okay, so yes, thank you, Dr. Betty. So this is our attempt to answer a lot of the different questions that have arisen recently and give some additional context and information to the board on how the institution is functioning, how it compares to a lot of our competitors in the state, and really look at some longitudinal data as we look at some of the critical decisions we need to make in the next few months. We have this broken into 5 sections, so a deep dive into various components of enrollment, looking at student success within the institution and comparatively, looking at some compensation measures. We have some information about the foundation performance, and then lastly, some financial data. So I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. Please feel free to let me know anytime if you have any questions, but also we've got all the experts here as well. So I've referred to them as I needed. So starting on page 3, we have kind of a snapshot of our fall enrollment longitudinally from fall 2020 to fall 2024, as well as our spring enrollment from spring of 2021 to spring of 2025. We can see that for both fall of 2024 and spring of 2025, we've had some fantastic gains there, both in the number of students that have enrolled in the institution, as well as the number of credit hours that they are taking. For fall semester, it is the highest in those categories since fall of 2021. For spring, it's the highest in those categories since spring of 2020. So really good effort by the team here in terms of bringing in new students and helping retain existing students. So definitely positive trends that we like to see. Any questions on that high level enrollment? Okay. Moving on to page 4, starting some of our comparative analysis. So there are a few different sets of measures to look at. One at the top is a 12-month enrollment. So this is the unduplicated head count for students that attended fall, spring, and summer. And then the remaining categories are just based on fall enrollments. And what we have here is Butler Community College metrics compared to total metrics for the Kansas Community College system, as well as WSU Tech, since they are a very close neighbor of ours. Again, we can see for the large part, Butler has had a bit of a downward trend the past few years until the most recent terms, where we have had good upticks there. You can see for the most part, a bit of a decline in community colleges in terms of head count overall over the past 4 years. So not necessarily outside of the norm relative to our comparison set. But definitely opportunities there to continue the good growth that we've had these past 2 terms. One thing I would note is certainly some very strong enrollment by WSU Tech, and that likely has a little bit of influence on what we've been able to do in recent years. Any questions there? Oh, yeah, I'm not scrolling. Okay. Next table, page 5, we are looking at internal enrollment by our different locations. So one thing that's interesting to note here is the large proportion of enrollment that is students taking credits online. That paradigm shifted quite a bit actually with COVID-19 and is accelerated a bit since then. So as of fall 2024, almost 44% of our credit hours were taken online. That doesn't necessarily mean that all students are taking, or 44% of our students are taking online. There's a lot of them that might have a mix of online or on-ground courses. So just an important thing to note there. The El Dorado and Andover campuses each account for just under a quarter of our enrollment. And then you see some of our smaller branch campuses and high school enrollments. Okay. Moving on to page 6. Looking at technology.
May I
Yes.
please say one thing? Like you don't know, right?
Why not?
Relative to the corrections, we did get a letter from the Higher Learning Commission today that we have been approved to offer courses and associate degrees through the prison education program. We still have a few I's to dot and T's to cross, but we really are excited about that opportunity for those students and as well as the college to grow enrollment. So stay tuned on that once we get the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
Yes.
I have a question on page 5. How come Council Grove isn't listed?
It's part of the Flint Hills, so it's Council Grove and Marion
Thank
combined.
you.
And are you the number of high schools and Rose Hill? Is that Rose Hill High School stuff and all the other high schools, or why is it different or separated out?
The programs in Rose Hill,
Those are primarily the early college academy housed at Rose Hill.
Okay.
It does include some concurrent credit classes as well. And then the welding is on track to be launched in the fall, and that will be rolled into Rose Hill. The other high schools are, I don't want to call them outlying high schools, but Derby would be a good example. Jessica, you could probably be more accurate than I think.
Anything that high school partnerships does. So if they're concurrent classes, taught at the high school, that's where those would land.
I had a question. Online is at 43.6%. Is that due to student preference or is that due to, there are certain classes that are only offered online?
largely due to student preference.
Student preference.
This may be an unfair question. If you don't know, that's totally fine, but how much did online enrollment increase because of COVID? So what was it in like 2018, 2019?
So I don't know offhand. I would say that if I recall, it was around 25,000 credit hours. I can look that up and back to you. My recollection.
Kim, if it's all right, we'll email that to
Yeah,
the
that's
full
fine.
board. So you would like to know fall of 18, fall of 19?
Yeah, just a ballpark for those. I'm just.
Page 4.
Yeah.
And, continuing, so we have the form. Not much worse than overall. And, when we look at someone to do that's doing that, or we really, or enrollment is down that. Well, that's,
Yeah.
But is there something in that community college average that is an outlier and took it out more in line or?
Yes, so since these are totals for the community college system, it would be affected more so by your Johnson counties and the larger community colleges. So that would be driving it quite a bit. As far as if we were to take them out, I'd have to look at that and get back to you.
Linda, we can access the data through the Kansas Board of Regents, and it will tell us exactly which colleges have been up in enrollment and which have been down. We can give them that data to you by number, if that would be helpful. We could give that data to you by region?
I think I gave that to you guys last year. And the year before, it was on K-Board's website and it had Butler ranked among all the high schools. We were,
The numbers were too little, I couldn't see it.
My observation has been, when you see all the community colleges together. You've got an outlier is Johnson County. And then you've got Butler County is followed by similar size colleges and then. I
Agree with that.
see us compared to more of a like size group and see how we. look
Like-
to them.
Like Garden, Dodge, Hutch, Butler. Hart.
But you know what I'm saying?
Sure. Well, it really would be, because I can think of one or two of the small colleges that had significant increases and one or two that had significant decreases, but it would be better to look at a group of peers based by size, so we can get that data.
if you,
Working. Then. Because on the small side, they might only have 6. Cities, that's different. They're no-
would you mind copying this and giving everyone a copy?
Is that the
That's-
listing?
That's the 19 through 24, all community colleges, I think, and tech colleges, I think. No, this was like a year ago, I think.
Next.
I think that has them all on there for like 5 years.
The most recent data book for the system of community colleges was published within the last month or two, I think. So we'll make sure that that data is included.
Okay. So page 6, this is a view of the technology-related majors that we offer at Butler and their enrollment and degree level at which we offer them and how that's trended over the past 5 years. Overall, we can see that enrollment has increased over that span from 385 students to 460. You can see at the various degree levels, so just to decode, the certifications differ based on the number of credit hours associated with them. So a Cert A is a certification between 16 and 29 hours required. Cert B, between 30 and 44 hours are required. And an X-Cert is a short-term certification, so less than 16 hours. And then you have the 2 associates. Questions on that data?
Another interesting piece of data that is not in writing, and I just learned this from Jessica today. But for our technical programs that were connected with enrollment coaches, we saw a 13% increase in enrollment.
The enrollment coach programs are not just technical. We have there's a more broad list of programs, but yes, for spring, we had a 13% increase over last spring. And we had an increase for fall as well.
Are we capped in any of these technology programs? I mean, have we reached a point where we can't take more students even if we wanted to?
Yes.
Yes.
What is a like business tech is Cert B? And then you go down to data analytics and it's X-Cert. So what's a certificate be to an X certificate?
Yes, so it's the number of credit hours required in them. So a
Oh.
Cert B would be 30 to 44 credit hours. So our longer certificate and the X-Cert is less than 60.
Now, do we not offer anything in database administration anymore?
That particular major was sunsetted, so that one is not an active one anymore.
It is sunset.
Yes. But yeah, and over the span, that one was finished and we did add a data analytics certificate, so that is a new one. In terms of largest growth, our cybersecurity associate's degree and certificate programs have both had very strong growth over that period. Thanks. The associates in particular going from 70 majors in fall 2020 to 145.
Thank you.
past fall.
Thank you.
Jessica, I'm sorry, did you say that some of these programs have maxed out and there's a waiting list? And is that? Are we looking at providing more slots or is that not practical?
We are looking at additional resources for that. So for example, welding, we'll have welding in Rose Hill. That one I know is primarily for high school students, but hopefully that'll help open up some slots here in El Dorado for adult students. That one I know that we are looking at adding. However, I haven't heard conversations about some of the others. Like for instance, auto is one that is sometimes filled up. Diesel was really strong this fall, so we potentially may have some need there as well.
Thank you.
And that's probably a good segue to the next page, because I know there were questions about specifically about new programs and how we were trending with enrollment in the new programs.
Yes, thank you. So we can see here on page 7, these are the new programs that have been offered with new enrollment starting in fall 2021. So this was an attempt to capture ones that are materially different than existing majors. So we might have had a few majors that have been launched since then, maybe 1 or 2 different courses. These would be materially different than them. So we can see the number of enrollees, sorry, the number of students that have enrolled in each major or certificate by year. On average, we've had about 5 new major programs added per year, fluctuates a little bit. You can see typically they'll start off with the exception of construction technology or workforce development. They'll start off in single digits and then grow from there. So it's kind of the typical pattern that we would see in new majors that are being offered.
So how many hours do you take for a certificate versus applied science?
Yes, so the associate's degrees, those are 60 credit hour requirements.
Okay,
The certificate, it again varies based on the level. So the X cert would be less than 16. The cert A would be between 16 and 30. And cert B would be between 30 and 44.
30 and what?
44.
Mary Martha, it's also noted in the footnote at the bottom. Well, for your
Oh, that-
future
Thank you
reference,
so much. Very nice.
something for you to look back at,
Yes.
right?
We've seen a decline in construction.
How much of that is at the prison included in, is there any construction technology at the prison?
Yes.
What, so how much would we be doing?
Well,
Right.
so I believe, without looking deeply at these numbers, I believe that the numbers there have decreased because of the change in population at the prison. So some of the residents there have been moved to other facilities, and so those were residents that would be more likely to take these classes. So we have seen that happen.
So we've added 5 new majors per year during this span. Have we gotten rid of any others? Are there any that are not performing well that we've phased out? Or is it all just new stuff?
Aiden cited the database administration, but we have asked Dr. Robinson to look at the low enrollment programs and bring back some recommendations, and those will be based on realistic potential for growth
Right.
or times to walk away from them and look at other potential growth areas.
Yeah, because I mean, now that we're finally seeing an upward trajectory, it's kind of like figure out what it is that's working, like what Linda was saying, and focus really, really hard on those and let go of things that aren't.
Kim, my experience has been, we're community colleges, and we collectively have been great at adding things to meet needs. We have not been equally great at taking things away.
Yeah.
And so we are
It's
looking
really
at
hard
that.
to declutter your house. I don't care who you are.
Don Ford,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. And that's part of why, I'm sorry, part of why I asked about the online thing too, is I'm curious because I've said this before, but I have no way of knowing. It just feels like if we've had a significant uptick in online and we see that's where a lot of the future is going, then I still think there's comes a time when we have to really take a hard look at our actual brick and mortar presence everywhere, because like I'm having trouble getting insurance on my office in Augusta. My carrier just decided to stop carrying downtown row buildings. So it's like, it's crazy. And then on houses, if your house has a roof over 10 years, I mean, that's 10 years old, it's way bigger. It's just going to be a bigger and bigger problem that really, I think is gonna impact us. Yeah, sorry.
I was just gonna say, and then what about the cards? Pretty soon.
Well, if you look at, there are really 3 sections with that. The culinary, the sous chef, and then the professional culinary arts. And the professional culinary arts between the degree and the certs is pretty healthy.
I think public safety may end up going up if they allow 20-year-olds to start getting into police academies. So then you have an 18 and a 19-year-old who's taking classes in.
Well, again, Dr. Robinson is researching the obviously low enrollment areas.
Now, our Digital Plus, is that in film and production? What? I wonder what the Media Plus would be under.
Well, if you go to the preceding page 6, digital media, it shows the enrollment between the associates and the cert. Then if you turn back to page 7, you see the esports digital events management. And I cannot answer the difference between those two, but we'll get you the answer.
Any other questions on new major enrollment? Okay. So transitioning to page 9. This is a high level look at our current year tuition, as well as some preliminary projections on what tuition could be budgeted at for next year. So this year, in terms of the rate, we are at $99 per credit hour for in district, $130 for in-state, $190 for out-of-state, $190 for international. The budgeted credit hours we have there is about 135,000. For the model going forward, our current assumptions in our model are to keep those credit hours the same for next year, again reflecting good enrollment, and adding a $4 increase to the tuition for all 4 different categories. There is also a proposal for a 5% increase in our technology access charge, which ends up getting rolled in the overall tuition and fee package that the student gets charged. So based on that, our current year budgeted revenue from tuition and fees is 18.8 million. With those potential increases of $4 per credit hour and technology fee, we would anticipate next year's tuition and fee revenue at 19.4 million. And that would be an increase of a little over 3%. versus this year's budget.
We changed the model to the same rather than percent because we had raised. We thought raising the tuition was gonna have. So now we. said. What happens if we look at an average?
Yeah, we do have a few different variations that we've looked at in our model in terms of the pricing of the increase for that. In terms of maybe elasticity, if you're referencing that, we discussed that a little bit more in our tuition fees meetings earlier this month. And kind of came to the conclusion that because our increases are lower than the rate of inflation, so the real increase to students isn't positive, and that it would not have a material effect on enrollment. So as long as we keep those within that parameter, we don't particularly see any issues there. Also, when we look at comparisons to some of our closer schools, so WSU Tech, for example, pricing there at WSU Tech is quite a bit more. If you look at the average pricing, it's $272 per credit hour for their programs. They do have a wide range, but again, based on some of those criteria, we don't think there's any materially negative effect in enrollment based on this particular piece.
And part of my thoughts on looking at that percentage, potentially trying to shift the increase. As to But when we go back to the information that we looked at this, expected development of there. And then we start to look at the list of additional needs. I think, I would feel more comfortable with maybe we could work hard to accomplish that and make sure that we keep our approach is in the new budget, where there's some other things here. But I definitely think that we are seeing that. So maybe we could.
The good news, I bring forward good news to the board, and it is this. In spite of the state funding for next year still being murky, there is money for student success, which will cover our enrollment coaches' salaries. So I'll make Kent nervous, but I'll say it's a done deal.
And we're projecting.
Yes.
Guilty.
Did I make you nervous? I'll try harder.
You mentioned WSU Tech had a 272 average. What's the source of that? 'Cause their publicity says 135.
So actually, if you go to their website, they'll show you a breakout by program. So there's about 4 or 5 programs that offer $135 rate. So businesses again was one of those. As you get into some of the other programs, into some of the more technical science-based ones, those are in the $200-300 range. So they actually publish it. And then also on the Cable website, they'll list an average tuition for them, and it is $275 there. $272.
And our 144 doesn't include books, right?
Correct.
I've always used a different number of ballparking. It's much bigger. It's not cheap depending on the class and sometimes it breaks.
But when you're looking at that, Shelby, is there a material difference in book cost at different institutions, or are most institutions about the same?
Just when I'm thinking numbers, I just throw $300 a credit hour on 10,000 new students is $3 million, or whatever it is. Just ballpark. I know it's probably. Well, probably.
You know, the good news for our students regarding books is our open education resource, OER, opportunities that have saved our students significant book cost. And that's been in place since 2019. 20.
Shortly after I got, it's expanded.
Any other questions on tuition and fees there? Not, the next section is broken into 2 pages. So the bottom of page 8 is a little bit of the narrative of Butler Creative TV financial position. And then the top of page 9 is the table showing some of the financial figures. So we've got financials posted for FY 24 and FY 25. FY 24 would be actuals, and FY 25 is a forecast based on what has come through and what we anticipate to happen for the remainder of the year. From a financial standpoint, we do get revenue from 3 chief sources. So auxiliary revenue from Butler TV, so any sort of promotional activities that we have related to Butler, as well as sponsorships. We do get a small portion of tuition and fees, net of the aid that we offer the students on Butler Scholarship. So that is reflected in there as well. And then we also get the state aid associated with students. And that will fluctuate based on the mix of courses they take, whether it's tiered or non-tiered, the amount of reimbursement we've got. We can see that the number of students on scholarship has increased from 24 to 25, from 19 to 26, so that's positive. Looking at the expense side of the equation, staff and staff compensation and fringe is the largest expense related to BCTV. So we can see that there. And then we also have an equipment lease that we have entered into to help us provide the services. The lease started in April of 2024, so there's a small portion of the lease there. Otherwise, $61,000 would be what we expect for the remaining of that 5-year plan.
So it's April 24 timeline when we knew we were going to have additional lease expenses, but we thought it was going to be offset with a big student increase. And we're not seeing that, or a different event. I mean, at one point, there was indication that we were going to see significant billion growth. Through this, we still going to see this huge, I mean, a large increase in students in the program. So is that still happening? This is something else.
Thank you for that question, Linda. And I can't speak to what Bill had previously spoken to you about. However, the program, in my eyes, is still in its infancy. We are not quite 2 years into the program. We are growing each year. You think when we started the program, we started out with 2 or 3 students. And so if you look at the data, we're sitting at 26 students now. So we'll continue to grow the program, or that's our goal is to grow the program. We would like to see it around 50 students. We are also growing our revenues as it pertains to outside opportunities for the institution. This is something that we've never done in the past. This is a new adventure for us. And so we're continuing to grow our outside revenue as well.
So, we've done a good job at looking at the staff compensation of benefits down, but that equipment is a lot. And so.
You are correct. We do cover the cost of our lease by our external revenue.
And you said we have 26 students, but it says students on scholarships, 26. Is it every student in that program scholarship?
No, not every. So I apologize. Not all of them are scholarship. No.
Okay.
We do have a
Ride
few.
scholarship or just partial? Because it looked like we're spending 234 grand on payroll and we're bringing in 108,000 in revenue. Is that because they're mostly on scholarship?
So our students are on a full ride scholarship. Yes. Our staff, we have for BCTV, we have 3 full-time staff. Right now, we only have 2. And then we have a temporary contract employee. And so we are trying to fill that 3rd position. Yet again, these are expenses that the institution has had in the past. However, we have grown the program and we have taken on outside contracts to grow our revenue for the institution.
Where's that revenue reported to maybe offset the deficit thing? Is that in the different?
It's up here at the top, net revenue,
Okay. Yeah.
the first line item.
So that include, okay. So very little tuition and fees, and that's the revenue.
But we do get state aid, and because some of the courses are tiered, we get more state aid than for general education courses?
I think what Linda was saying, it was just presented more as a income generating process.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
black and white it was.
in fairness, any program needs a reasonable opportunity to grow. It's a rarity that you're going to start out where you want it to be. So my recommendation would give it at least another year or two. Typical ROIs are between 3 and 5 years. But to Kim's point, doesn't work, then say it's not working.
Christina, what's full ride? What does that all include?
Books and tuition.
Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Are the full-ride scholarships designed to help grow the program quicker, or do we feel like we need to offer that to get students?
So that's a way that we can attract students into the program, and it allows us to be able to utilize our students for our BCTV activities and our program to produce our productions for us. But they don't have to, not all of them choose to be on an activity scholarship. Some just want to be a part of the BCTV program and will work for us as a student worker.
I do have a human interest story if you'll allow me, but I think it was the first ball game I attended, home ball game, and I was seated near at the aisle, and I saw a gentleman walking towards me, and I thought, he looks really familiar. And he stopped and he said, Dr. Vietti, John Eck with the Wichita Business Journal. And I said, John, I thought you looked so familiar. His son is going to Butler and he is having the best ever educational experience. So how do you put a price on word of mouth too?
No, I think that this is a good decision. I just wanted and want to make sure we're looking at it and paying attention to that we're seeing. It's also not only seeing, I understand the longer ROI. That's one of the reasons before I was asking the question, understanding that the idea could take 3 semesters to actually see the students. Where are we in this mix and are we seeing moving forward? Because to me, that was a very important.
So typically when a college submits a new technical program to the Tech Ed Authority, we have to do an application form, and it does include the equivalent of an ROI. So if I were a board member for any new technical program, I would expect an ROI laid out. That's only makes
To be on
sense.
a 3-year schedule, and sometime a year or two ago changed to a 2-year, but it seemed like we weren't always updated without some digging. And I don't have any problem with this one as much as I do with like the doubling of the marketing budget. Stuff that we traditionally spent half as much and now we're spending twice as much forever unless we decide not to. Or this is going directly to students.
Any other questions on BCTV? Nah, actually move into marketing. So at the bottom of page 9, high level marketing trends over the past 5 years for budget that's been allocated to that group. So payroll, we can see that has increased from 349,000 in 2021 to 576 this year. A big portion of the change there is related to some new positions that have been filled in that position department. So a content strategist, a writer has been added, as well as a social media coordinator. And then we've also had increases in non-payroll, primarily in advertising and services. And that has reflected increased attention to this area and some transitions in the way we market, moving to more digital advertising, as well as some program specific, cluster specific program advertising. We did have our peak budget year in FY '23, and it had decreased by about $70,000 2 years thereafter.
And I would add, we are benchmarking with other similar colleges and that's very guarded information to get, as you might expect, but we are aware of one truly pure college by size that has a staffing pattern quite similar to ours.
Any other questions on marketing section or enrollment overall? If not, we transition to page 10, the start of our student success metrics. So here, first table, we've got to look at our fall to fall retention. So just to describe the students that are included in this, these are students who enter our institution in first fall as a first-time degree or certificate seeking student, and they return the following fall. So we can see for the 5-year period in question here, our average retention has been 59.7%. That is very close to the Kansas Community College average of 60.2%, and actually a little bit ahead of the average we've seen over that time frame from WSU Tech. There's a little bit of volatility in this one because you have different cohorts and different effects on a particular cohort, but all in all, a reasonably positive trend relative to our competitive set. The second table below, similarly looking at our graduation rate data. So this is a 150% graduation rate, which means that the student completes their program in 1.5 times what they normally should. So if it's an associate's degree 2-year program, they should complete it within 3 years. If it is a 1-year certificate, they should complete it. And again, we're looking at only first-time degree seeking students, first-time full-time degree certificate seeking students here. From a graduation rate perspective, we have had some positive trends, but we can see the same phenomenon with the community college system in Kansas and WSU Tech. And this is an area where we do have a little bit of ground to make up relative to some of our peers.
Do you see a distinction between the sort of the gen ed, the folks that are moving on to a 4-year school versus the tech programs? And I ask that, I think of my son's situation because he took classes in high school. He took a year of courses at Butler and he ran out of courses to take. Butler could not offer courses he needed for the degree that he was moving into at KU. So he transferred as a sophomore. So if I understand this right, he would be pulling the numbers down, yet Butler provided exactly what he needed.
So that's a fair point. And I will say, I don't have the data included in here, but our transfer out rate, which is the percentage of students who also moved to a Kansas institution with a 4-year degree, that has increased over this time period. So he would be included in that metric, but yes, he also would be pulling this line down, so to speak.
But and I guess where I go with the schools that are heavier on the tech programs, those folks aren't, they're either getting they're getting what they want at that institution, or they're presumably not, and they're moving on to do something else. They're not continuing that education at a different institution. Would that mean that the institutions that are more heavily involved in tech programs are going to naturally probably have higher graduation rates than those of us that potentially feed, I hate to use the word feeder, but we're providing students that are going into 4-year schools?
Potentially, hopefully we would still do a good job of impressing upon the students, get your associate's degree on your path to transferring to a 4-year school, but that could potentially be something that you'd see.
And Forrest, from my perspective, I think this data is worth a deeper dive. Could we do a better job? Probably. So in the vein of continuous improvement, let's look at the next layers of the data to see. You speculated that for some students, they move on, it's in their better interest to transfer on than get the degree, but let's look at the data and then go from there.
Also think that on this particular slide, WSU Tech offers a lot more certificates than we do. And so where it talks about completion, is that correct?
Correct.
Right? It talks about completion. They probably did a lot more certificate completion than associate degree completions. So that's not our genre per se, like it is theirs. And so their 42.2 to our 28, those are certificates that the
Is that-
students are getting.
That's, did a better job articulating what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say.
This is where I'd like to see, instead of just a rate, the actual numbers of students enrolled in, because then you would know revenue generated instead of just percentage of arbitrary or whatever. And is that a typo above 2016 to 2020?
I was wondering that too.
No, so these are looking at an academic year, so it's several years in arrears to do this. So that would be a cohort that entered in 2016. for example.
Okay. So the ones that entered in 2020, they should have graduated in 2024
Yes,
on a 4-year track.
yes. And as far as our institutional data, I can tell you, our retention for the most recent term was 66%. That's what we reported to iPads. We wouldn't have comparative data for other schools yet because that hasn't been published globally. And our graduation rate is up for the most recent term. That's not on here. That was 32%.
Awesome.
Mary Martha, I think when we went to school, it's about 25%. That started out as freshmen that graduated as seniors.
Any other retention or graduation rate questions? So not looking at top of page 11, we can see comparative GPAs and transfer credit hours from both Butler Community College over a 5-year span, as well as the Kansas Community College average. Really, all in all here, we are right in line with our peer set. The 5-year average difference on really GPA or transfer credit hours, it's not that meaningful. So we're performing just as our peers are there. So students are doing well. A averages when they're transferring out, and they're transferring almost enough for an associate's degree. So good progress there. Looking at the bottom section of that table, we're looking at employment data that is reported for our graduates. So we can see in the top section of that table, the percentage of students that gain employment within 1 year of graduating. And for Butler, that's hovered around 72% over the 5-year period have gotten a job after completing a program here. It's a little bit better than Kansas Community College average at 70%. And then WSU Tech, the higher mark there at 80%. The subsection below that is the percentage of students that are employed in Kansas. So you can infer from those comparisons that the vast majority of our graduates stay here in Kansas to gain employment. When looking at some of the other community colleges, there's less that stay here in Kansas. So I would imagine a lot of that might be driven by ones in Johnson County, Kansas City area that move over to Missouri to get jobs. Any questions on that?
I would maybe echo Linda says it all the time, but we need to seek out some employers that would specifically want a program that we have to find employees. I know they're out there. But maybe a little more effort of seeking them out. A lot of trades don't require degrees, but work is on the hard worker, so kind of a balance and catch-22.
Shelby, I think we have an opportunity to grow our internship programs because the research shows that if students are interns in particular places of business, the higher rates are much higher. And I was telling Linda before the board meeting began, the Board of Regents through a grant has created a KMI program initiative, and it stands for Kansas Micro Internships. They're not credit bearing, but they are perfect for our early college academy students and our high school concurrent credit students, because they don't have to carve out this huge amount of time during their high school schedules, but it introduces them to businesses in the area. They learn great skills and the businesses get a service in return. So we're laying the groundwork to get it launched, but we're very excited we have that opportunity. And it's a great way to connect with area businesses, starting with Butler County and moving out.
I think that's a big plus.
And then the final data set within this student success category, page 12, we're looking at median wages for our graduates and comparing that to Kansas Community College median numbers as well as WSU Tech. The top section of the table is average or median wages for that set of schools over a 5-year period, 1 year after gaining their certificate or degree. So we can see that Butler has had the largest growth rate over that 5-year period. And we do in many years have higher median wages than our peers in the Kansas Community College setting. Little footnote about WSU Tech. With their recent launches and investment in some aviation programs, that's potentially going to skew some of the earnings that you get for their graduates. And you see a little bit of that spike towards the tail end. The bottom section of that table is reported wages 5 years after graduation. So comparing the two, you can obviously see growth from year 1 to year 5. And you can see that in most years, again, Butler produces graduates that have higher earnings potential than our peers in the community college segment.
How do we keep track, or who keeps track of where they go after they graduate?
So we send out a follow-up, we and all community colleges send out follow-up studies to all of our graduates and students to see, are they employed, what are they earning, have they earned any sort of certificates or licensures, things like that. And that gets reported to the state.
So what's your turnout on that?
Our
You-
response rate, I don't know a number offhand, but I will tell you from the research office, they will say that we have one of the higher response rates of other institutions. When we send out the surveys, we personalize them slightly. If you graduated from a business program, you'll get a notification with your professor's information on it. If you graduated from welding, things like that. So we try to personalize as best we can.
And Mary Martha, we are required to do that for any of our technical programs that are receiving Carl Perkins funding.
Oh, that's right, yes.
I was gonna say, we had to do it in high school also. And the rate of getting in touch with some of the students were pretty hard.
Any other student success questions? Okay, if not, page 13, get into compensation. So the first section here is compensation specific to Butler Community College. The top of this particular table shows our payroll budget over a 5-year period. Again, that longitudinal look we've been consistently looking at, broken out by compensation and by fringe benefits. Fringe benefits largely being health insurance, but also including things like employer tax, social security contributions, stuff like that. So we can see, obviously, the increases in dollars year over year. Part of that you would expect as we try to keep up with inflation, and we offer salary increases to individuals, which is described a little bit further down the table. The third section, salary, that is the salary increase that we've proposed each year. You won't necessarily see a 1-to-1 correlation between a 5% salary increase and a 5% growth in budgeted headcount, because you might have changes in who was employed, the number of people employed, but that's the raise essentially that we're offering. And then the bottom section would be inflation figures tied to the consumer price index. So if you think about the relationship between the two, we would typically see a salary increase the following year, try to address what inflation was the prior year. As example, in calendar year 21, inflation in the United States was 4.7%. The following year, we had a 5% salary increase. So that would be the correlation. I didn't mention it, but looking at the health insurance line, you can see the dollars that we contribute to that, as well as the percentage of health insurance premiums that we cover versus the employees themselves. So on average, we're covering about 88% of the premiums for this health for our employees.
You do a very good job for our staff.
Nice benefit to have. Yes.
Yeah, is that CY's calendar year 2025?
Yes.
Expected inflation is 2%?
Correct.
I've seen reports that would just count that it's gonna be actually over 3%. Or,
So
or are you looking at inflation or consumer price index?
Consumer price index.
So are you seeing it higher
I'm seeing
for
it
the
higher.
CPI? well, we can follow up on that.
And that's January to December, right? That's
Correct.
remember you looking at-
Correct. All right, going on to page 14. Here we're getting into more comparative data, looking at a couple of key schools of interest to us. So we can see, these are actual compensation figures for these different schools. So we have Butler, Hutchinson, Johnson County, Kansas Community College, and WSU Tech. We can see the total compensation for employees at those schools over a 4-year period. And we can see in the middle section of the table how those compensation numbers have changed year over year, with our average increase during this time frame being about 3.2%. If you compare that to some of the other schools, it's right at a median or slightly below that. Hutchinson and WSU Tech in particular have larger increases over this time frame than us. Our overall compensation being very close to Hutchinson. And then again, noting the inflation index there, tie back to kind of the averages for increases in salaries.
And is this including health insurance?
No,
Do you know? Or do other colleges offer similar benefits to what we offer?
It's all across the board. It's like, yeah, it's like everybody does something a little bit different. We have some of the community colleges that just pay a certain amount to the employee and they can buy, it could be a single family, whatever. Comparably, what our comps show is that we're pretty close in line, pretty close. We are a little bit more contributing on our side than other educational sector. But as far as some of the community colleges that I have surveyed, it's very hard to compare because everybody does something a little bit different. Johnson Community College pays a lot for theirs as well, like we do. But some of the other smaller colleges are very much a flat amount and then you go buy what you want, or it's very difficult to compare.
We have any idea how Hutch affords this? And they're about 75% of our enrollments, and their compensation total is greater than 90% of ours. How, is their mill rate that much higher? Reno's that much bigger?
Well, beyond that, they have a significant number of industries that helps their assessed valuation.
Yeah, geographically, yeah.
to answer your mill rate question, their mill rate most recent year is 21.84, so it is quite a bit more than ours.
Yeah.
Although I guess what does that generate in terms of, I mean, from a, what's their assessed value compared to the mill rate to know how to compare it to?
So their assessed value is 741 million, compared to ours at 1.1.
$1.1 billion.
Yes.
So they're about 75% of our assessed value.
Yeah. So when you add those components together, for most recent year, our total taxes levied was around 14.5 million. Whereas Hutchinson, based on the mill rate combination and valuation, 16.2 million. So they had more taxes coming in.
So they're charging their residents more. Okay.
Did you say 60.2?
16.
16.2, thank you.
60 also, I'm sorry.
Thank you for calling that out. Oh, that's okay. I didn't.
Any other questions on compensation? Okay, moving on to section 4, we've got a page here speaking about the foundation. So the top table is the funding support that we've had over the past 5 years for the foundation. So you can see the number of supporters as well as the total funds that have come in from the foundation. I want to point out that in the middle of this cycle, we did have a capital campaign for the Red River Institute. So that will materially affect some of the numbers that you're seeing there in terms of the number of supporters and the total dollars that came in. So in particular, FY 22, big spike in the number of supporters and the total funding support. If you were to back that out, we still have a positive trend in terms of the number of supporters we've had, and more so than the funding dollars. Then looking at the scholarships that the foundation has supported, that has had a slight upward trend, going from 800 to 840 over this 5-year period, and providing good scholarshiping from $765,000 to the students to $900,000.
And just to clarify, Tom, tell me if I get this wrong, that number is set by the foundation board. They determine how much, what revenue is available to award to scholarships. So that's not just an arbitrary.
Right, the board chooses between 4% and 6% to spend based on investment returns, and if it's a good year, they tend to go with the larger disbursement. But we also have a 5-year rolling average that we look at. So as we look at the average, the balance of the endowment at June 30th, we take those 5 years and we average them, and that becomes our number of our distribution for that year. So in case we have a bad year, we are cushioned on our distribution. If we have a great year, we don't get to go hog wild on it, but it tempers the distribution somewhat either way, protects and then kind of tempers it.
Does that include Grizzly Backer scholarships?
If they're endowments, yes. There's endowments, and then there's current scholarships or current funds, which can be spent down to zero, depending upon the need.
But hasn't the foundation board approved the percentage options? It seems like for the last several years, they've approved the highest percentage each year.
They have, in fact, they just approved at our last meeting 6% for fall 25. So it's we think it's a good risk because of the returns we're getting, and we'll keep doing that.
And then the second section noted here is just the funding structure of the different community college foundations within the system. The vast majority having some form of funding from the college, 11 of them totally funded, 5 partially funded, and 3 totally funded by the foundation.
And Butler falls into partially funded by the college.
Correct.
So on the foundation, the increase in scholarships, do you think that has heavily influenced the increase of enrollment that we've had?
I'd say it's certainly a factor.
So if interest rates were to change and the foundation didn't have as much money to give out, then our enrollment might take a hit.
Potential.
Business Journal this week announced the nonprofit fundraising list. And that was one of the six.
Wow.
It's interesting to me, just how much we can raise.
I think the county would say the same thing to you.
Yeah, well, how do you say no to those cute little baby animals? Come on. And there are elephants on the way.
They don't say it.
So do you recall what the top 5 were, Linda?
It's really wildlife. Memory gala for Alzheimer's. Learning. That's kind of popular Park Spring. And, 5,200,000 memory galleries.
Fundamental Learning Center.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is Coke money that was Coke sponsoring it. I don't know that they're very.
Regardless, kudos to our foundation. And as a shameless plug, we do have an auction coming up.
Yes.
An auction on March 7th. Get out your cowboy boots, your hats. Come on down.
It's fun to attend it.
And Jennifer just informed us, I think it was a day, all the seats are filled. We were
Wow.
concerned that there were some seats available, but if you're in the house, glad you're gonna be there. If you're not in the house, well, maybe we can squeeze you in.
I think we'll find a room for a seat for any board member who
Yeah.
wants to be there.
I did find it also interesting that we're scheduled for this first year during that There's none really. Diminution.
Alzheimer's just had theirs.
Yeah.
Like I said,
When does the United Way blackout end?
Oh, gosh.
We used to
Is
know
that
this.
just in the fall or does it carry across the new year?
No, I think it's just the fall.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's when they do most of their fundraising of the organization.
They do most, they're September, October.
Yeah. It's a busy time that time of year.
Yeah.
Okay, last section we have on page 16, looking at some select financial data. So top table here, we're just looking at our budgeted overall operating budget for the past 5 years, broken up between payroll and non-payroll. And on average, we've increased our budget in these two areas by about 4.5% each year. So it's pretty consistent between the payroll and the non-payroll side. So if you look at kind of the inflationary environment that's taken place over that time, and look at the averages, in some years that would be below what we had for inflation, and in some years a little bit above. So that's one factor that was certainly. The bottom section is a high level look at for our college valuations within Butler County, the mill levies that we've had for the past 5 years, and the total taxes levied during that time. That's the top section. So we can see that the mill levy has been as high as 18.007 in FY 21 and is now sitting at 13.239. Valuation has increased each year, starting at 801 million in FY 21 and now to 1.1 billion. The result of that is a fluctuation really in the taxes that have been levied through that time period. So 14.4 million in taxes in FY 21. And then it decreased into around 13 million in the next 3 years. And then this year up to 14.5 million taxes levied. The bottom section of that table is kind of a year-to-year breakout in how the total levy taxes levied has changed. So for example, going from FY 21 to FY 22, the total mill levy taxes went down 1.5 million. And then you can see the breakout, kind of like a volume price analysis, how the taxes have been changed relative to the valuation increase and relative to the mill levy change. So the valuation increase has contributed some level of increase in total taxes every year. The mill levy changes, 3 of the 4 years contributed to a decrease, with last year resulting in a decrease. Questions on that? Okay, looking at next page, this is looking at similar data, but from a more comparative standpoint. So again, we're looking at some similar figures here, the mill levy taxes, but then also introducing population for various counties and the average mill levy rate per person. So on a mill levy rate, we can see that our levy has changed over that 4-year period. It's gone down by about almost 27%. Whereas the Kansas Community College average has gone down 3% during that time frame. So that our rank in terms of the mill levy rate in 2025 was 18th out of 19 different community colleges. The mill levy taxes, for us, it has increased from the first year to the 5th year in that time frame, up 0.7%. The Kansas Community College median has gone up about 19%. Our total taxes levied in FY 25 ranked us 5th colleges. Starting to break that out based on population trends. Population, Butler County, relative to the other community colleges, is the 3rd largest county of the Kansas Community College counties, and our population has grown significantly higher rate than the other community college populations have. And then lastly, looking at how we apply the mill levy taxes on a per person basis for people living in those particular counties. Our per person mill levy tax rate sits at $187 per person in the most recent year. That's down from $215 per person later in this study. Looking at that compared to the Kansas Community College median, there's a big gap there. Going from $318 per person in FY 21 to to $350 per person in FY. So comparatively, residents in our county are getting taxed at a lower rate for community college than other institutions, and we actually rank lowest on that measure. Questions there? Yes.
I like hearing that.
Mhm.
Do you, can you tell me the population of 68,632? Do you know what percentage of that population are actual property owners and what percentage are renters? If there's been, has there been an increase in property ownership? I guess maybe it's what I was trying to get at.
I'd have to look that up and see what those numbers are.
Might know that report now.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
They might know that.
but Aaron would be able to tell you, I mean, Ryan.
I'm keeping notes on additional data to bring back to you, so we will have that as well.
El Dorado can help out Andover.
Ooh, with the water line.
Huh? No, not yet, but
This,
Heard about that.
this provides it reinforces what Kent has talked to us about with the budget that, you know, we did good things in cutting back the middle because we had extra money to spend at the time. And I think, I don't want to put words in Kent's mouth, but I think the theme that I've heard is that we may be cut too deep and we have to adjust. This reflects that. I mean, we're the second largest community college in the state, yet we're the fifth highest in taxes levied, which means you've got, if you assume Johnson County is one of the four above us, there's three community colleges that are levying more taxes than we are, that are substantially smaller than we are. Because we're not, third is not really all that close. Hutch is, we're at 4,300. Just looking at the cable sheet that Shelby sent. Johnson County's at 9,900. We're at 43. The next closest school is at 3,000.
And I would point out that's full-time equivalencies and the definition of an FTE. And Jessica, you may need to help me. Is it 12 or 15? It's 12 for financial aid, but it's at 15 for pay board. Yeah.
Yes, a part-time student would be counted as a third of a student.
So, this market analysis in Nutley County says that we send out about 3,000. You know, some people own multiple properties. But so that doesn't really mean 50% of our population have property ownership. But considering, when I look at the commercial side of that, there are not less commercial properties than I expected when I look at it. 1,460 residential parcels, only 1,385 commercial.
Wow.
That was really low. And then the farm sites, agriculture. I mean, but like I said, 1,300 commercial.
Thank you.
Any other questions here? If not, we have one final page looking at our composite financial indicator score over the past 5 cycles. So this is a metric that the finance department publishes each year, made up of 4 different components. A primary reserve, which broadly speaking is a measure of your net assets divided by your expenses. Your net operating revenue, so that's mainly looking at revenue minus expenses over your revenue. Return on net assets, so that's the change in your net assets divided by your total net assets, and viability, your expendable net assets over the long-term debt. So the 4 different measures of the institution's financial health. You can see in the notes in that table, there is a range of scores that the Department of Education kind of ascribes value to. We are on average in that 3 to 5 range, which says that we need to direct resources towards transformation. Our goal would be, at least in the next several years, to consistently be in the 5 to 7 range, but we're looking more at dedicating resources to the future. So you see a little bit of fluctuation from year to year, but generally speaking, we're in that 3 to 5 range.
And if I could add something to that, Aiden, I served on the Higher Learning Commission Board of Trustees for a number of years. This is a big deal. The CFI is a huge deal. No institution wants to get flagged. And so I urge the board to pay attention to the CFI. And from my perspective, to do all you can to raise it. And I think that the incoming president, that will be very helpful to the incoming president to get into the transformational range.
Well, in order to do that, I mean, we literally, it tells you, consider substantive program adjustments, then re-engineer institution. And I have not seen any desire for this institution to re-engineer itself in the 3.5 years I've sat here. And that, I'm not saying that to be accusing or negative, but I'm glad this says it. Like, can we please do this so that this becomes a more robust institution that we can keep around long?
Well, I think you have a great opportunity, again, with an incoming new president. The board approved an environmental scan. We've identified a very skilled person to do that. We'll review the proposed scope of work at your March meeting, but that will lay the groundwork wonderfully to help the board and the new president and senior administration know what to keep doing.
Is
Uh,
this metric new? I mean, I haven't ever seen this CFIs.
No, it's been around a long while.
I don't think we've been presented that before in that manner anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you see it every year.
We've had discussions about CFI before. I don't know that we've
Good.
ever seen an exact breakout of -4 to -3 equals
No.
this.
I think the only thing we've seen is from BKD, where it was total dollars leverage versus income, and we were like, yeah, getting close. So like, not in trouble, but it was enough to say, hey, they're getting close to it was 5.7 or something like that.
Well, it's a great benchmark to track, and I want to take the opportunity to shine the spotlight on Aiden, who has done a remarkable job in creating a data book.
Thank you, Aiden.
He did have help. He didn't do it all alone, so look
He's
at
up
all
there
the
like, "No,
people in
no."
this room who provided him with data. But my hope for the board is, now that you have this, if it has meaning for you, just add to it every year. Now that you've got a format that I think I've heard works, we've got a little homework to do to bring forward a bit more data, but I think it's a great resource for the board and the new president and the administration. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I personally like to move towards efficiency, not just raise taxes because we're the least tax per capita. And something too, I've been mentioning over and over. I put this in Grok 3 on Saturday at a wrestling match. Said make more efficient. Boom, 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 like 20 decent ideas. So I would like to see you guys administration or even us as a board do stuff like that, because you can compare and contrast with other universities. You put whatever PDF you want in there, it'll analyze it and say, because they brought up the CTV and how much it was spending versus revenue and some suggestions there. I don't want to bring it up in public right now, but I mean, it was a very helpful tool to even analyze and get a little deeper in and give some ideas.
On to
What
your
was-
point,
What
Grok,
was the, I'm sorry.
it's Grok.
Brock, it's an
3.
AI.
It's an AI.
Yeah.
Ah,
But you
And-
can literally just talk to and tell it what to do, or I just dragged a PDF and said, analyze, and I took last year's budget and drug it in there and said, cut 10%, and it had, just if I was running a budget, I would say, if our income comes up 10%, or if it goes down 10%, I want 3 options personally. And it runs it that way and gives you ideas. It's not, I mean, it's just an AI, but it's at least a sounding board.
It's not just, it doesn't discriminate because it's just an AI. And
Yeah.
to the point on AI, like my work has, I have different licenses and various different things that I do. But one thing I see coming down the pike is I genuinely think that AI is going to replace a a substantial part of the residential appraisal industry. So for me to be focusing my efforts on that is fruitless. It's just going to become more and more frustrating to me, more and more automated. So then it's like, okay, where do I want to put my effort then? And I think that's what this institution and everyone should be doing too. It's just like, okay, the tech programs, it makes sense. You can't teach an AI to build a house, someone has to physically do that. So that may be where a lot of the opportunity is to weed out the things that we know are just going to become more and more automated and focus on things that can't possibly be automated.
And our competition's gonna do it too, because everything we do, we're publicly funded, so are they. They'll just say, hey, let us see budgets, Butler's last 5 years, boom, boom, boom. Whereas we should be proactive with the tools that we have that are available. I mean, it's a free, it's in beta, or you pay $300, which I think we should do it. And you could get the full bore
How do you spell it?
GROK. But there's 3 different AIs competing right now. And I think that's the one that just came out. But I was sitting there, I'm like, oh, let's see what happened. My kids were looking for
Yeah.
Spider-Man, whatever. I'm like, let me see my phone. And it was interesting. It took 75 seconds to go
Wow.
through
Yeah, Chat GPT.
the entire budget and break it all down. Like, this is just a breakdown of this, which is extremely helpful.
And my daughter,
And yeah,
I shouldn't say this, but she might not like it. But she had a text from her boss at work and she was like struggling with how to reply. So she plugged it into Chat GPT. It gave her a response. She added a little flair to it, sent it off. And I'm like, I wouldn't even think of doing that. And that's just where it's going. It's crazy.
yeah, we're
I don't like it personally, but that's the future. I don't have to like it,
leaving your diagnosis and your blood work from your doctor. Put it in there as well and have a second opinion from the AI.
So
We all want to become less intelligent. by-
AI is an amazing tool, Shelby, but please do not put any PII or personal identifiable information in there. And so I would caution any Butler data that you're putting in there because it's building its model based off of data that you put in there. And so it's not secure. And so when we move forward with AI tools and start to use AI tools in our environments, which I strongly encourage the use of AI, but as long as we do it in a responsible and ethical way and manner. And so we have to be very careful about what data we put in there. It is an awesome tool, but we have to be very mindful of what data we put in there.
Published budgets are already online. Readily available to anyone who just types in. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, just be careful.
Aaron, I think you have something.
Well,
to
it's
say.
on the
You look like
CFI.
it.
I don't want to interfere.
No.
It's okay. On the CFI score, it said our primary reserve CFI is 1.0. Is that the same, that like the 10.5% that we're trying to keep in reserve?
Not exactly, because these numbers are taken from the financial statements in the audit, which is on an full accrual basis. And the 10.5% is on a cash basis, or what we call a statutory basis required by the state. So it can't compare totally.
So which one is more critical? I mean, should we be paying closer attention to the primary reserve CFI or sticking with our 10.5%?
Excuse me.
Are they not?
They should be related.
Right.
But I couldn't tell you which is more important. I think from my perspective, because we have to deal with a legal budget in the state of Kansas, that I tend to gravitate towards a cash basis or what we call a statutory basis of accounting.
Thank you.
I'd sure like to know that too, if it's 25% over those 4 categories or what on the CFI.
If they're equally weighted.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, because it's confusing that our CFI score is 3.81, but then the others are so much lower.
It's the sum.
Oh, gotcha. So we want to be looking at the 3.81 total.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
corresponds to the rating range. So,
Okay, well, it's a little better than what I thought
yeah,
then. Okay.
direct resources for transformation.
Okay.
Any other questions for Aiden? Or congratulations. Thanks again.
It's
And for
been
everybody that
wonderful.
contributed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Answer this out. Reboard first.
We're segueing now into Ken's presentation, but I will offer an editorial comment, and it is this. I hear what you're saying about being efficient and effective. I really hear that. I also believe you cannot cut your way to prosperity. You have to grow. It has to be a combination of both. Be efficient, stop doing what doesn't make sense, and then target growth areas.
I've asked for years, zero-based
No, I
budgeting
I
would
think
be an
everybody already
amazing
had one. We're
way
good.
to approach your yearly budget instead of just 5% growth every year.
Well, the new president could take that on, and I'm a big fan of doing that, not every year, but periodically. I've done that in 2 other institutions, but that's for you and your new president to work out. So now I think we will turn it over to Kent, but context always matters, right? So here's the context we shared with the board as we were working on the draft FY26 budget. And we said that we had 4 goals. We wanted it to be based on data. We wanted it to preserve Butler's reputation regarding the quality and impact of its programs and services. We said we wanted it to attract a rich pool of presidential candidates and one great one who would say yes. And of course, we wanted the support of the board in this. And I'll add the PS, the board working in tandem with the administration and vice versa. So a quick 50,000 foot level of what Kent's going to show you. It does include what we identified as must pays, and I'll call them no brainers. We have to pay the electric bill. We have to pay the water bill. We have to have insurance. We have a vital few tier 1 needs that are additions to the budget. And when I say a vital few, I think I can count them on less than one hand. We believe strongly in reasonable compensation increases for our people so we can attract and retain talent. And we remain committed to the administration's goal of achieving $500,000 worth of reductions in the operating budget. So with that said, the budget for next year draft form still does include an increase primarily because of must pays. I do want to take a minute to talk about the revenue side. I mentioned that the funding at the state level is still a little murky, but the House higher ed budget has moved to the Senate side, and we breathed a sigh of relief collectively as the community college system when we knew that our credit hour funding, tiered and non-tiered, would remain flat. That's great news in comparison to the news the universities have gotten. We still think that's the case, although there might be a slight decrease. We know there is going to be student success funding, yay, enrollment coaches. We know that we are going to receive funding for business and industry efforts and apprenticeships. We know we're going to receive some capital outlay funding, although it has been decreased. The whole system experienced a decrease. And I'm so sorry, Christina, but we know there will be no funds for cyber security. So that's what we're pretty confident.
What'd you say, Shelby?
Said Bill used.
What we know, but again, it is still a work in progress, and I think we may have touched on this with the board, but if not, we have been encouraged strongly by Heather Morgan not to set our tuition and fees too early this year, to wait until the dust settles in Topeka. So as a heads up to the board, it's most probable we'll be bringing that recommendation to your board meeting in April, although we'll certainly have a work session beforehand, so it's not to catch you off guard. So with that said,
Dr. Vietti, one other thing is the $5 million.
oh, thank you. And so one of the great things, form partnerships wherever you can, whether they might make sense at first blush or not. We owe a great deal of thanks to the private colleges and universities who lobbied quite successfully with some help from Heather Morgan to build $5 million for the Kansas Promise Scholarship into the higher ed budget. As far as we know, that will remain. But again, the budget is now in the hands of the Senate. Okay. I'm done.
Okay. So, I just have a couple of things here. We'll talk about the FY26 budget as the main part of this presentation, but the first 4 pages on the handout that I gave you, it's really sort of some contextual data. And so if you look at that first page, and I'm not going to go into great detail because I could spend an hour on this, and I don't think you want to do that. But I think it's important that we reemphasize periodically how we structure the funds of the college. And so we're going to be talking about the operating budget. So if you look at this first page here, page 1, the first section here going down to where it says total general fund designated reserves. Those are all what we call designated accounts, and you can see them. We've talked about them over time. I'm not going to go into them. And where it says reference below on the following page, they're numbered, and there's a description of each one of these funds or sub-funds or designated reserves, whatever you want to call them. And I think it would be of interest to you to spend time looking at that. Again, I don't think we want to take an hour in this work session to go through that, so I'm not going to delve into it in great detail. Down in the middle section here, and it says reference 15, which is where it's explained on the following pages. That's the amount of our unencumbered cash at the beginning of the current year that was in the operating budget, $9.048 million in the operating budget. There was $9.194 million in the general fund designated accounts. And then there's some in the tech fund designated account as well. And if you go down the lower section, you have funds like capital outlay. That was a mill levy fund that we just have a residual left in there. Campus life is obviously the dormitories and the student union. ABE, adult supplemental is a non-credit. Restricted funds, those are mostly in and out, except we do have the self-funded insurance in there, which is why there's a significant balance in there at the beginning of the year. I think it was 1.9 million by itself, and the other restricted funds are very low. Agency accounts are really just money that we're holding for other like student groups that raise money, and then they have a balance. So you see overall at the beginning of the year, we had around $26 million of unencumbered cash, whereas what we look at for the operating funds is much less than that. And then down to the bottom, there's just a little reconciliation, because when we look at this in August, there's always some post-closing adjustments for the audit that we make. And this year we made 106,000. So when we showed you the unencumbered cash, which I've shown above, this was taken from the November update, and it was 25.951 million. At the August update, we said 26 million. So there was this $106,000 variance, which is really small. A lot of years it'll be a little bigger than that. It's normal to be expected, but I just want to show that. And again, the next 3 pages is all descriptions of these types of accounts. So again, that's just contextual matter before we move into the budget. I went through it quickly here and ask if you have any questions, kind of leaving it up to you also to maybe look at that on your own if you want to.
Okay. Probably Dr. Vietti, you said that the reduction of $500,000 is not reflected in.
So,
No.
so this doesn't really deal with, we'll get into that in the
Okay,
next part
perfect.
that we're
Thank you.
dealing. Yeah, this was just sort of, like I say, contextual information, and the numbers there are only the unencumbered cash in those particular funds or designated funds at the beginning of the current year. So when we bring you the the spring update book, probably in April, we'll show you again what we expect to be year-end balances as well. Okay. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. Now we
There
can.
will be a test.
Now I'm going to jump down to page 5. And these are the assumptions that we currently have making up the budget. And so this is some of the things you've talked about. Some of it's a repeat from what Aiden told you, like number 1, the student tuition and fees. We're planning on proposing to you a $4 across the board tuition and fee increase. We're leaving the FY26 estimate the same as the FY25, as Aiden also mentioned that. And the technology access charge, we're planning on recommending a 5% increase, which approximates to about $1 per credit hour for most students. I said $1 increase. That's a $1 per credit hour increase. So the way that the tech fee is built is if you take 12 or more credit hours, there's a certain amount that you pay for a full-time student. If you take like at 9 to 12, there's a different rate, but it is approximates on average to about $1 per credit hour. The state aid, we have been told that it will go down at least 467,000 roughly from what we're getting this year. That's sort of a best case scenario. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. But it's not going to be any better than that, according to what we're hearing from Heather Morgan. Again, hopefully it's not going to get any worse. Some of these, what we call non-operating state funds, like the apprenticeship or workforce development funds, capital outlay, and those, some of them we think we're still going to get money right now. Like for instance, the capital outlay, which we can use for deferred maintenance, we've gotten approximately 1.6 million the last 2 years. Right now, we think we're going to get about 600,000 for next year, which is a big drop, but it's still at least some money where we don't really have any provision within our operating budget for transferring significant money over for deferred maintenance. So if that goes away completely, we're going to have to rethink how we're going to fund our future deferred maintenance. Transfers, we're not looking at any significant transfers. And the reason I put this in here, last year, or excuse me, for the current year, 25, we transferred $1 million from the deferred maintenance designated account over to the operating budget to maintain our unencumbered cash sort of at an equal level to where we were in the past. So it didn't drop down as quickly. We were scared about it dropping further with some of the things we were hearing from the state But when we made the presentation to you last month, we were thinking maybe we would need to transfer another million for FY 26, but we feel now that that's not going to be important, and we don't want to more or less raid those designated accounts any more than we have to, because they are important for things like deferred maintenance.
Helper number 3.
Oh, yeah, we don't want to talk about taxes, right? So, thank you, Jackie. Local taxes, no change here from what we told you last month as far as the administration's recommendation. We're estimating a 5% valuation increase, and we feel that it's important that we gain back 1 mil for next year to keep from having a significant drop in our unencumbered cash going forward.
Got comments now, or you want to wait till you're done?
Go ahead.
On the tax thing, the 5% increase, the county has been pretty accurate with regard to what they've increased our valuation with what the market is doing. And our market is definitely, I would be shocked if we have a 5%
Okay.
increase. This, within the last couple of months, we've gotten data coming out that this is the first time in years that our median price of house in the Wichita Metro has gone down by 3%. And the first time that sellers are having to take less, than what they've listed for, and they're taking longer to get those prices. If interest rates were to go up, to go down measurably, then I could see this, but I just don't see interest rates going down measurably based on, again, what's going on. So I just think that's a cautionary tale to expect that to go up 5%, because it just, the housing market is not projected to do that. So I'd be surprised if our valuations do.
Yeah, I appreciate that input. Generally, and I've based this on historic data. Generally, a little later in the spring, I'll check with the county to see what they're projecting, but
They
now
can
that,
get away with it one more year, but they're gonna have homeowners really pissed off if they try to keep pulling this up. They've gone up like 30, I was doing the math on what we have in the Southern report, and it's been 36% increase since whatever it was, 2020. But that's accurate. Like, you can't, I have people call and say, oh, I want to fight my taxes. And I say, well, would you sell your house for what it's appraised for? Well, no. Well, then you have no argument, unfortunately, you just don't. But there's a place where that scale tips, and we're dangerously close to it. Like, it's not going to make sense to keep, it's not to say no property should increase their values, but
Yeah.
across the board, big percentages of, increases, I just don't see as.
and it is a variable we can look at sort of in real time and see what that change does to the overall budget for us.
But
Tim, have you heard anything in the legislature about any kind of cap on increases in property taxes?
they were looking at a 3% red
Well,
cap.
yeah.
Which they did that before
Yeah,
8 years ago, and then Butler County got a bunch of new vans, and they went around and raised everybody's the size they could stand, just in case.
Yeah, well, and Butler County historically
Maybe
has
10
the
years ago.
values higher, closer to actual value than what Sedgwick County does. Like, they historically put their county valuations below what the market value actually is. So we get double whammy between that and having.
The thing to remember on this, a 1 mil increase, even with no valuation increases, is a $1.1 million tax increase, because we're currently worth 1.1 billion. The 1 mil is 1.1 million, but if there's billion plus 5% at a mil, so it's 1.1 plus 5.
Yeah, I
It's
would,
at least a $1.1 billion, $1.1 million ask.
This market study is saying that 86.6% of residential real estate would trend upward. And from 24 to 25, the residential median increase is 4%.
What's that based on? That's not what I'm seeing on my.
I read that too.
Well, this is just from this,
That's Butler
markets
County thing.
that
that
were-
they're-
Oh, that was in the
Market
newspaper.
Yeah,
this is their market study. And then on the commercial side, they're saying almost 64% will trend upward. The median increase on commercial is 4.3%. So I don't know if it'll,
I would love to know where they're getting their information, because
they've got
It's
a
fine.
whole, they've done this whole study that just must have just been posted because I found it today when I was looking to see if they posted new values yet, which they haven't.
I can always tell when the secondary market gets nervous, is when the federal government comes out with more regulations for us as appraisers. And March 1st, a new regulation goes in that we have to justify our adjustments within our sales comparison grid based on market data. I'm like, you want me to do a compared sale analysis for my square footage adjustment and my age? I'm like, it's impossible. And the reaction, the most significant reaction that happened was prior to this was 2009, 2010, when we had the crash, and they came out with a new form that we had to do. So it's the same type of thing, just a different version of it. And this is the first change we've had in since that market crash. So that's not necessarily our area, but it's definitely nationwide. There's concern.
Well, Wichita, I mean, they've just published articles recently that says Wichita's residential housing is going to stay on the market longer, that they're not going to get asking price. They're probably going to get less than where the market, 2 years ago, you listed it and then they all agreed to pay more or offered to pay more than what you were even asking for. They're saying that's not going to happen again. So there is a trick to that, but that doesn't mean that the county, this report is done by Stu Baker, so.
What I heard Ken say too, and we appreciate that both sets of info, we'll check on it in April and
Yeah.
come back and test it with you and see if it's resonating.
Regardless of what the county does, every local school board, us,
Oh,
we set
yes,
the
sir.
taxes levied on our citizens, regardless of what the mythical value is.
Okay, I guess we're ready for employee compensation. Well, we have built into the model at this time, and Shelley doesn't think this is enough, but we have a 3% salary increase for both 2026 and 2027. And the estimated cost of that for 2026, including payroll taxes, would be about $1,067,000. A 0.5% increase provision for equity adjustment. The cost for that's about $165,000. And then a health insurance increase of $350,000, which is approximately 6.3% for 2026, and then a 10% increase for 2027. Non-compensation expenditure. So this is our additional needs.
Go back to that employee compensation section. So, I checked with somebody else just that's in the county about the percentage of health insurance that they pay, which is 85% instead of 87. I know this is radical, but if we didn't have any salary increase and we looked to the end of the year to see what was left over and we gave bonuses, we wouldn't be committing ourselves to 3% on top of 3% on top, as we've been doing. I feel like we should try to honor that health insurance 87% because those are actual dollars, additional dollars they would have to pay, for insurance, although someone mentioned to me that, do we know if everyone that's on our insurance plan, do they have options for insurance at maybe significant other at their employer? And if they do we have any kind of penalty?
We do not.
Take that, we do not, okay. So those are just my comments on that, and
If I may. So in my research, nationally, salaries have risen between 3.5 and 4.1% annually. Okay, and that's overall. And
whose salaries, all salaries.
all wages. Yep. Salaries and
all
wages.
industries.
Yes. And then the actual salary increase for US employers in 2023 was 4%. In 2024, it was 3.6%. And most are going to hold steady to that increase in 2025. And most of this information you can find on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I also look at SHRM and I look at the labor market that we're in and other things to help guide that. People need more income. Everything else is going up at home. Some of the additional type of things that we have seen in addition to inflation is that medical care has increased by 2.6% over last year. Education costs have increased. Recreational costs have increased. Motor vehicle insurance, hey, 11.8% over last year. So all of these things, shelter increased 4.4%. That's rent. That's those type of things. I don't know about you, but my water bill went up 12% over last year. So even if we left, the insurance flat, which I'm going to really work to do, the amount of money that they make every month or every 2 weeks is what gets them by. It's what puts food on their table. It's what gets their car gassed. It's what makes sure that they can pay for their daycare costs that are going up. So I am hesitant to say a bonus is going to fix that. A bonus is also taxed at a higher rate, so they get far less than they would when they get a pay increase. Hopefully that some of that amount is going to also go into the retirements and capers and things like that. So it behooves that salary to go up so that it improves that as well. So I'm hesitant to say a bonus would be worthwhile for many people, just because they really need it now to move their salary.
Just comments and then going back, I'm still hesitant on this 1 mil increase. I'm glad we're not taking the $1 million from the deferred maintenance, but.
I would like to talk.
Okay.
You all know what I'm gonna say, but you say 3% overall. Overall businesses and employees in the United States are not tax funded. They can't just raise property taxes to give their employees. If you go to Wendy's now, it's $12 or $13 per person that every customer pays. We're only raising our rates less than 4%, but demanding 8% increase. Oh, whatever the number is, close to 8 by the time you figure in all the compensation. I think through efficiency, we could consolidate, raise class sizes, not spend the extra $700,000 on marketing and get to that number without raising taxes. But I think if we don't get efficient and we just continue to stay a little bloated, I don't think it's a good long-term solution. And now is the time as a board to make a few ways before the new president comes in, instead of kicking the can down the road and letting them deal with it 2 years from now, but things don't really spike up.
Or use it as a huge hiring point of reference. If you say, this is our CFI score, how would you propose that we change it? Just give us some off the cuff ideas, because I think it needs to be their number one thing stepping in here to get us to the future.
I mentioned before, if Linda's not willing to raise a mill, I'm not, Tim's not. It would be nice to let the administration know now to plan accordingly, but it depends on the other 4 trustees, majority vote. But if the will is not there to do it, let's not wait 2 months and then have to change things in our budget. That would be on the other board.
And I'll just echo what I said when you brought this up last month. You've been preaching for 6 years, we should be making data-driven decisions, and you're proposing to make a decision without having the data. We don't know what the state's going to provide. We don't know what the tuition and fees are going to be. We don't know what the final budget is going to look like. Yet you're saying we should tie our hands and commit right now that we're not going to raise the mill. That is completely non-data.
You cut $700,000 of marketing, $300,000 to the foundation. That's $1 million, which covers that. That is data. Running that through Grok to get efficiencies is data. I'm not just willy-nilly, but we haven't every year come budget time. Wait. wait. And then, nope, we ran out of time. We'll just do it next year and get more efficient. It never happens. So we could plan prior, get lean, but we haven't gotten lean. We just have some attrition here and there. And then every year, healthcare goes up 10%. Our insurance is going up 10%. Our buildings are under 70% capacity. I don't know how that's sustainable. And we're kind of here trying to make Butler as sustainable as possible.
And the
So
building
that's my opinion.
insurance is a perfect example of something that we could be studying and nobody touches it. And if we're at 70% occupancy on our structure, that just based on what he said, I don't know that for a fact. Why aren't we looking at that? You know, and if our classes aren't at capacity, where could we move, consolidate things? And, why aren't those things being looked at as closely as the tax and thing? Because I'd be a lot more comfortable. I mean, the numbers that where we rank in other counties and tax wise and stuff are better than I thought. I'm like, wow, that's actually good. That's cool. But it's, if you don't look at all aspects of trying to protect the organization and you're only looking at this chart drives me crazy and we see it every year and it's only got two things that are feeding it. There's so many other things. And sorry, I say this every time, like, can we look at other things on a graph besides just the property taxes as being something to get us through?
So we have three major sources of revenue: state funding, property taxes, and tuition and fees. The two we have control over primarily are student tuition and fees that we focus on growing enrollment and the setting of the mill levy. We're a bit at the mercy of the legislature in terms of state funding, although we have one of the best lobbyists in the state to advocate on our behalf. But from my observation, parking bias 17 years ago, as I'm coming in as president, I do not see a lot of fat in this institution. I just don't. And I've said it before, but it's hard to cut your way to prosperity. You do have to look at efficiencies. I don't disagree with you. We're looking at low enrollment programs. We're looking at classes with low enrollment and combining those. And that happened this spring, I know for a fact. But you've also got to grow your revenue. And there are two sources that we have control over. And back to Forrest's point, if you want to be data driven and you look at the data and you look at where we fall with the mill levy and you look at the revenue lost from one of the two sources of funding that we have, it's problematic.
But I also think we can look at grants and partnerships. And I mean, those are sources of funds that we have done some that, we're seeing just in our candidates, some of them have been fairly successful with that. And the partnerships is definitely one of the things. And I'm not saying it has to come out of salaries. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying it has to be an absolute zero increase, but I just want to see what are some other opportunities, if there are any.
I had a conversation with someone that works at WSU Tech and they said one thing they had real success in was changing the times that their courses were offered, and their staff didn't like it because they weren't working the traditional hours. But it was like, well, if you want a job, this is what we're going to do. So that is a way where you completely change the income stream without impacting what a person, if we don't lay people off or whatever. Because I don't know how this looked in years prior, but it's just logically, we're spending $4.5 million in payroll to generate 18.9 million in tuition. That's just, I say you don't have a lot of fat, but those two notes, like, that just doesn't jive to me. I couldn't, anyway, running a business, you would never have that kind of, offset. And I know there's state funding and I know there's taxes and that's what's meant to bridge the gap, but when you rely on the taxes too heavily, you put your whole community at risk.
It is a delicate dance. I really understand that, but again, going back to the data, if you look at the per property tax per individual, Butler is almost at the bottom.
That is at the bottom.
Well, thank you. Is at the bottom. So number 19 out of 19. And it's not that the administration isn't willing to look at areas and ask if there is a more efficient or a more effective way to do it. In fact, I've been very impressed with what I'll call executive council. There may be a better word for whatever you call yourselves, but I have found them to be open-minded and to ask continually whether there are better ways to do things. And I think when we do the environmental stand, I envision that we're going to get some very good feedback about what we should be doing differently, what we should stop doing, and what we should do more of. Processes drive outcomes. And so I urge the board to let that process of the scan help drive outcomes.
The thing that I'd like to see us do with the president search though is, we say, okay, let's say we're the absolute best when it comes to community colleges, but that still means that there's 85, 86, 87, whatever it is, more counties that are in a way better position than us because they're not encumbered by a community college. One of which is Sedgwick County. Our growth rate in this county should be astronomically higher than what it is. And it's hindered by the fact that this county supports this college. That's just a fact. And there's got to be a way, I've said, I know it's maybe a soapbox problem, but how do the 19 community colleges band together to make these other counties help support these schools?
They-
I mean,
That has to be done legislatively, and if your legislator's not willing to go up against him, which she is not,
I disagree.
it's
I
not
think-
going to happen because Wichita State University Tech, we're paying for it over here in Butler County. All 105 counties are paying for the 6 regent schools and all of the technical schools.
Exactly. So
It's
if the
just the
community
18
colleges were-
community or the 19 community colleges and the 18 counties that are paying individually. And I have told my senator and I've told my representative, let's go way out to Seward County. There's somebody in Morton County that lives in Elkhart that goes to Seward County, that goes to school and goes back to Morton County and works for an employer over there. And Seward County residents are paying part of the cost for him to go to that school when really his income and his livelihood's being generated out of Morton County.
Right, so if we know the state's not gonna help us, we've got 20 years of data saying the state isn't going to help us, then the community colleges need to band together and make it hell on earth for the counties that don't have community colleges. If all 19 of them raise their tuition astronomically higher for out-of-district kids, something would change. Like you can't, I know it sounds extreme and it's like, oh gosh, we lose half our enrollment. But you know what? If everybody did that, then it wouldn't be just one college doing it. I mean, we're actually very fortunate that we are in the location that we are compared to some of these more rural counties. Like I genuinely feel so bad for them. I don't know how in the world they
Well,
make it work.
we also have almost 100 years of history behind us too, of what we're providing and
But
word
history
of mouth.
changes and times change and, I pull up the, like, Sears should have been Amazon, but it wasn't. Why not? Blockbuster should have been Netflix, but it wasn't. Why not? You can't wait till you're Blockbuster or Sears and be like, oh, okay. To be proactive with that.
Or on,
Jim, if I could, I'm sorry, but the idea of 19 community colleges banding together, raising their rates on out-of-district students is just not realistic. I've been in this business 40 years And that's just not going to happen. I mean, you can say that and it sounds good from a perspective, but the community colleges will not work together like that. That's just a fact.
Well, I think the question, it's always good to look at things through different lenses, and I hear what you're saying, I really do. But one of the questions in my mind is, why are the counties who house community colleges and have high mill levies so willing to fund their colleges to the level they do? So it isn't an anomaly that some of our community colleges, several of them, don't have the angst with the local mill levy that we do. And I get that our proximity to Sedgwick County is a double-edged sword. It's ready access to a student population on the one hand, but then you have developers saying, yeah, Butler County taxes are too high.
But we
So
could- We're the second biggest, first best. We could charge for our product. That's the best. 70% drive from Sedgwick County employees and students. We subsidize them. They drive home. Doesn't generate us revenue really. But we could charge enough tuition increase to pay all of the proposed increases. And if the market bears it out, that's supply and demand.
Well, but I think you have to trust what our analytics folks look at and where the elasticity comes into play, and raising out of district tuition by $25 a credit hour might look great for the bottom line right now. And then what happens when our enrollment tanks next year? Oh, well,
It wouldn't
I
be
guess that
that.
was a
It'd
mistake.
be closer to 10 or 12.
Well, you understand my point. I mean,
Well, we
the
do it
point
with
is
our
you're
dorms,
essentially,
we do it with
that
meals.
premise disregards the expertise that we have in-house that make
But
recommendations
we-
about where that balance should
We
be.
raised tuition and then we gained money and we didn't lose students and our tuition was higher last year than previous and we still gained 5%. So it wasn't strictly a supply and demand issue.
so if
But
you
if
go
our
back,
product's amazing, we should be able to charge for it.
if you go back to the data, sorry, Shelby, it's not good to interrupt a board member. I apologize.
You need to.
If you go back and look at the data, and correct me if I'm wrong, or Aiden if I'm wrong, Butler has one of the largest tuition differentials, if not the largest, for out-district versus in-district students.
Can I say something? The difference between in-county tuition and out-of-county tuition is $31 a credit hour. For a 15 credit hour student, that's over $600 per semester.
Yeah.
Or $1,200 a year. It's already significantly higher for somebody outside of the county. To raise it anymore, I think is not going to be a good thing for our students or for the college.
Just get a part-time job. I worked through college, 40 hours a week, took 18 hours of college. You pay your way, you're adults. We paid K through 12 for dependents, and now we're paying for adults to come to college and we're subsidizing adults. We could choose you need to pay your own way, I think.
Data Guru has something to say.
Yeah, just a couple of data points to reference. So relative to tuition, our in-district ranks 12th amongst the Kansas colleges, Kansas community colleges, at 12th lowest. Our out-of-district in-state ranks 6th, so above the median. In terms of efficiency, just a quick number I had on my laptop, our student faculty ratio is 18-1, which when you compare that to the Kansas Community College average is 6th. So the average is, I think, 16.5 FTE. So from a faculty to student ratio perspective, classroom, there's some efficiencies there too.
Thank you for
So
that.
let's look for unique funding sources that we don't look at today.
I personally think we have an opportunity to be more strategic on capitalizing on grant opportunities, Linda. And that is within Aiden's purview. So I'm setting the bar up here, right?
I would just say, I think it would be pretty unrealistic to think that grants, though, are going to become something that's really changes our reliance on the three main sources. I mean, we've had people try to get grants before. A lot of them are for specific things. They're not the type of revenue that really raises the bar for what we look at when we're looking at, 18 million from student revenue, 14 million from the county, and 16 million from the state. It's just not something that's going to raise the bar there.
Okay, point counterpoint, you're witnessing a disagreement between the CFO and the president.
I'm not saying that it's wrong to look at it. What I'm saying is it's not going to be significant enough to make that, to make us do away with taxes.
Right now, we're talking about $1.1 million or less. And I think there's partnerships out there. I mean, I look at the information we received tonight. I like the fact that we're growing in the cybersecurity area. I think there's big opportunity there, and I think there's opportunity for partnerships, and I think some of them are fairly local. And but again, I mean, there's large corporation. I mean, I've spent a career grant writing at different times, and I realize it's sometimes a one-off, but a one-off every year is pretty good.
Well, I think Jackie's talked about environmental scan, strategic planning. If we, want to make that an effort, I don't know who's going to go out and find this partnership that's really going to bring in a significant amount of money that's going to change our budget picture. I don't think anybody's going to do that in the next 2 or 3 months to affect this budget before we hire a new president. I think it sounds good. And if that's something that the president wants to direct somebody to do, I think that's a good idea, but it's still an unknown until we find that. And is it out there? I have my doubts, but I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it needs to be done in a systematic way, and to say, let's go do that because it can change our budget for next year. At this time, I'm sorry, but I don't see it.
Okay.
And I know that I'm getting into some things from my point of view here, but we need to have these conversations in depth. I don't know if we want to continue it at 15 to 7 tonight, but we're hearing this, shut down buildings in order to save money. Well, we looked at that, Kim, and I think we reported back to you. We looked at closing down the 800 million. The information went to Kim. It was my understanding she was going to present it. It was going to save us about $20,000 a year when we looked at insurance, facilities management people and utilities. It was about a $20,000 a year savings. I don't know why it wasn't reported back to you. I reported it to Kim.
It was. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm gonna,
Very minimal.
time out, time out, okay. Not to curtail the conversation, truly not. But I think the jury is still out, and being the overly optimistic person I am, I do think there is potential with grants and partnerships. Is it the magic bullet? No. But we shouldn't at this point leave any stone unturned, given where we are with the budget. And so if I were queen of the world, I would say to the board, let's build a budget for next year that enables the new president to create a trajectory that everyone can support. I have 2 more comments and then I'll be quiet. I really value this open conversation. And even though there are differences of opinions, that's how we get to a better place, a better decision, if we all feel comfortable in expressing different views. So I want to thank the board for that. And then last, it's a soapbox thing, and I'm just saying, so someone once told me that there were 3 presidents he would throw himself under the bus for, and I was one of them. So yay, team. I would throw myself under the bus for the Butler Foundation. And I would defend our marketing efforts. Yes, I'd throw myself under the bus for marketing. Can we adjust the budget? Perhaps. And we will look at that. But those are two entities of the college that do magnificent work. And I just wanted to go on record as saying that. And I would love to be moved beyond saying, well, should we have them? Should we not? Let's value their work. And let's ask them to look for efficiency. But on record, kudos Foundation, kudos marketing. Oh, and all the rest of you. I'm done.
I soapbox to interrupt, Linda, just, I'd like to see the 80-20 analysis. We have all the data on underperforming programs, 2 majors here, 6 kids in this class. We could analyze that, the bottom 20%, cut off 10% of that and find our savings. It just takes a little bit of work. Not that no one's working, but that's not in the discussion of making cuts that will cost some people some jobs, but I think it's necessary.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because, never point your finger at a board member. Because as we are looking at $500,000 of cuts, there are positions that we may not fill.
You're doing attrition cuts, not cuts. Possibly.
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah.
Budget being less next year.
I think
Well-
it's worthwhile for everyone to remember that our collective bargaining agreement with the association does not give us the right to just slash 10% of the faculty payroll because we decide there's going to be a 10% cut. It is a much more difficult process to achieve to achieve labor cost savings because of that contract. It is not as simple as it's made out to be during a lot of our discussions.
And I mentioned a 2% cut.
Well, but
Bottom
any
20.
cut.
I understand, but we can't just keep all employees forever with a 10% increase in their wages forever. You can't run a business that way.
Well,
Bunch
we
of
we
bunch
are
of lawyers
looking,
are getting rich.
if I could
off of
say
it
this.
For you state.
yeah, we look at every retirement. We look at all of every week, we look at what positions do we have open that have become vacant? What does it do for our budget if we slow fill it? What do we do if we don't fill it at all? Is this one we can let go of? And so we really analyze all that all the time. And so, we have a lot of teacher retirements coming up. I think there's probably 2 or 3 that may not be brought back, or they may be allocated to places that need it more. And we don't have to spend extra to add that in. So we do that a lot. I mean,
That's not what I'm asking. I appreciate that you did.
as far as attrition goes, I would much rather do it that way
Sure. that's
than
easy,
have
yeah.
to have people that have been working hard in their jobs and we still need them to have
Well,
to let
I'm
go of
asking
them.
For the inefficiencies to go. I mean, it will be sad for the sad few that.
Yeah.
The program just aren't, we got rid of massage therapy, it wasn't demand, we got rid of auto body, it wasn't the demand, we just have to say. We tried it and it didn't work, we had construction in Rose Hill with 0 students, that went away.
Yeah.
So. just stuff like
Well, our VPA has been tasked with exactly that. Look at the low enrollment programs and bring back some recommendations. So that charge has been given.
And I'm only one, I can't give a charge, that's my opinion. I don't think that's fair, I can't mandate.
Well, but I don't think, Shelby.
We could ask you. To
You
do
can
our-
direct
do our
me
willing, you can.
as directable
And
as
you
I
can say,
be.
hey, you're only one. I mean, that's up to you as our.
But
one
no, we've
liaison.
had that conversation within the administrative team. We've got to look at program enrollments that are low and decide whether they are growable or whether they are not.
No.
What?
Just growable or no.
Well, yeah, growable or no. We're having a mind meld.
We've had a healthy debate on this. I would suggest we let Kent get back to telling
Yeah.
about his notes.
Wrap it up.
Or we're gonna challenge the
Uh-huh.
praise we've given Dr. Vietti at the last 2 board meetings about how quickly
We did good for a while.
managed to finish.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much more you want to do really. The
I think we get the
page
point.
that's up on the screen, the next page shows the items that we consider to be additional needs that we're adding, and that includes the payroll compensation items. You can, I'm not going to go through them in detail. You can look at them. We do have the showing you on the final page there what it looks like overall. We can go into the budget, look at, okay, what would it look like if we lowered a mill? What would it look like if we cut $1 million? I would leave it up to you at this point. I don't know at 10 till 7 how much more you want to do. Mary Martha says no.
I think we need to look it over and wait for you guys to come back.
Yeah, well, I would, we have more work sessions and, I think it was nice we were able to take the time to look at some data today. Maybe you want to focus more on the budget at the April session. We can actually get into looking at what certain, what would it do if we raised tuition another $10, things like that, Yeah.
Well, we have a March course.
I think
Session.
Jessica wants to look at that. Yeah, March. I skipped ahead a month. I'm sorry. I meant March. So
You just assume enrollment will be the same and we would know what it would be.
So before we finish though, we do need to give kudos to Jessica and her group. I have to be honest, when we passed those dollars for she and the different things, I was skeptical. But I'm very proud of what you've done. And I want to tell you that, you and your group. And so, it helps and I appreciate what you've done. And I'm so glad that we're getting state funding. And that's not something that we would consider no funding.
And I would add to that there's been a bashing of marketing over the last, when our enrollment was declining, marketing was the easy punching bag about what needs to change. They need some support and appreciation for the fact that the efforts that they put in over the last 3 years, that has to be part of this increase. I mean, it would be naive of us to sit here and say that the additional positions and dollars that we've spent in marketing haven't contributed to any of what we're seeing in the last year in our enrollment increases.
So it's hand in hand. In fact, the educational coaches came out of marketing as a testing ground in culinary to see if this would even work. And we saw some productivity there, and then it moved into more programs, which Jessica took over and decided which ones would work. So, there's some things that marketing is doing that our job is to work with Jessica to set the opportunity for enrollment. And that's, and her strategic thinking on how to best communicate that is where that money's going, with the additional positions that can communicate in a very direct way. And it allows Kelly to think I challenge her to be more strategic. I said, do not write any more press releases. I need for you to be strategic in your thinking, and that's paying off. Because that's where she spends a lot of her time. And then her staff implements the plan.
Well, if I can say one thing to you, it behooves us as trustees to get out and see what's happening on this college campus. There are a lot of good, I'm telling you, when you go to a music concert and they're changing clothes 20 different times in an hour period, or you go to a ball game and you see all the student involvement, or you go around campus and you see students smiling. It's about the students. The students sell Butler Community College. And we have to remember that as trustees, that this is a student-driven organization, whether it's online students, whether it's here, but it's student-driven. And if you're out and about, I'm telling you, when I go to athletic events or when I go to music events and different events, and I go to a memorial service that 2,000 people are at, and you absolutely cry over the eulogy, man, it's time for us to quit bashing. And I understand we're talking about money, but we need to talk about the good things that are happening at Butler, because there's more good and people are getting value for their buck here at Butler. Even the community members are. So that's all I'm gonna say. You need to be about and look what's happening on the college campuses. Walk around and listen to the instructors instruct. Walk through the Student Union Center and buy a sweatshirt and see how much of a pleasant experience it is. But, you know, I'm kind of tired of the negativity, to tell you the truth.
I think we have touched on everything that we had for the work session today and
I will say it again, it has been rich, thoughtful, thought-provoking discussion. And I am optimistic that we are a team of the whole working for a common good. So thank you. And I am thrilled that it's not yet 7 o'clock and I think we're going to adjourn. Are we gonna adjourn?
I'm glad Dave reminded me I'm supposed to go to ceramics right now and see my two daughters. I forgot last work session.
I would just point out that we are saving money on heating costs as half the
Yeah.
people are wearing coats.
Yeah, I was.
Is that?
Oh.